All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. Bear with me just a moment. I'm setting up a few things with the camera here. Okay, and we should be good to go. So good afternoon again. My name is Ryan. I'm the Wellness Program Administrator here at Georgia State University's Employee Development and Wellness Services. By trade, I am a registered dietitian, so my job revolves around all things related to food and nutrition. Today, we are making use of the WebEx platform. So if you've got any questions, comments, anything like that, we encourage you to drop them in the chat. We'll be sure to monitor that chat. During today's presentation, I'm joined by my colleague, Tony Pilote. She'll be looking at the chat. So if you're having any audio or visual issues, set the chat message to go to all panelists. That way she'll be able to see and help diagnose any issues you might be having. If you've got questions or comments related to the recipe, we love to hear them. And at the end of today's presentation, I'll be sure to review all of those and discuss them. We are going to be recording today's presentation so that you can view it at a later time or share it with a colleague who may not have been able to attend today. We also upload all of our cooking demonstrations to YouTube. We do have an EDWS YouTube channel where you can check out past videos from cooking demonstrations, the workouts, and more. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be making a lemon roasted vegetable hummus bowl. These are perfect for meal prep. They're designed to fit into meal prep containers and get you about 4 servings from one batch. Now you can always double up on it if you want to stretch it a little bit further. These are super tasty and very healthy, but we'll get into all those health benefits as we go ingredient by ingredient. We do have a couple steps here that are going to involve the stove and the oven. So you are going to need a stove and an oven for this. And I'm actually going to go ahead and get started with our quinoa because we do want that to begin cooking. Now, if you've never worked with quinoa before, it is a healthy whole grain. It's kind of like rice in some ways. You add water to it, you cook it, and it fluffs up, and it's a good starchy carb. It's very rich in fiber and actually a pretty good source of protein as well. So a lot of people talk about it being a superfood. So we're going to make it the base of our bowls that we're building today. Now, we're going to need 2/3 of a cup for this recipe because the quinoa will triple in volume whenever we cook it. So we're going to end up with 2 cups of cooked quinoa. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out 2/3 of a cup. And when you go to a store, you'll actually see a couple of different kinds of quinoa. This is tricolor quinoa. This is just from Kroger. So it's got red quinoa, black quinoa, and your typical colored quinoa. You can actually buy any variant. They're all very healthy. I just happened to pick up the tricolor one. Now, there are going to be cooking instructions on the back of the bag you can follow. But something a lot of people overlook is you are actually supposed to rinse quinoa in a strainer before you cook it. This is just to rinse off any dirt or things like that that may be on there, just like you do with vegetables. So I'm going to turn around for a second and rinse this off in this by just pouring the 2/3 of a cup into my strainer. Okay. So nothing too complicated there. Like I said, pretty similar to how you'd rinse a vegetable. Then I've got a small sauce pot here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the dried quinoa into the sauce pot. And you may want a spoon or something to kind of scoop it out of your strainer. Okay. And then the ratio of water to quinoa, it'll say on your bag, but most bags will have a 2-to-1 ratio. So I have 2/3 of a cup of quinoa in here. So I'm going to add 1 1/3 cup of water. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to put this on the stovetop and bring it to a boil. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And what'll happen is that quinoa will reach a boil, and then we're going to turn it down to a simmer. So this is pretty similar to how you might do rice or pasta, other things like that, with just a couple changes here and there. So we'll get it to a boil, and then we'll bring it to a soft simmer, and we're going to let it cook for about 15 to 20 minutes. So that's just we're going to keep an eye on it once it starts boiling, and then we'll turn it down. But for now, we'll move on to our other ingredients. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our broccoli and our cauliflower ready to go. We're going to chop it into small florets. I've gone ahead and rinsed these. Now, if you don't have a lot of time or you're just not a big fan of chopping up vegetables, you can buy pre-chopped broccoli and cauliflower florets. They have them in little bags at the grocery store. So that is absolutely an option. Now, what I'm going to do to cut this is I'm going to cut off the base of it first. And the closer I cut to the top of the broccoli, the easier these are going to come apart later. Now, these pieces are absolutely edible. They're a little tough, even after cooking. So not everyone's crazy about them, but they are still very nutritious. There's a lot of value in there. So if you like them, you can chop those up into small pieces and cook them with everything else. We're going to keep it simple today and discard it. So basically what we're going to do is we need 1.5 cups of broccoli. So I'm just going to chop these into smaller pieces. You want them to be reasonably small so that they'll cook evenly with everything else. If you make one vegetable too big, it's going to cook at a slower rate than the smaller ones. So as you're chopping the broccoli and the cauliflower, just try to keep it somewhat consistent. So since we only need 1.5 cups, I'm going to cut just a couple more off here. And you will have some leftover broccoli depending on the size of the head of broccoli that you bought. Now, we are just roasting vegetables here, so if you don't want to mess with having leftovers, you can always chop this up and just add it with the rest of the broccoli. It won't throw off the ratio too much. You'll just have a little bit of extra broccoli in some of your bowls that you end up making, which is certainly not a bad thing. So in terms of piece size, this is what we're working with here. That's probably about 1.5 inches tall or maybe 1 inch tall. So that's going to be my standard size that I'm going to go for with all the cuts that I'm making. So what I'm going to do is a baking sheet here, and I'm just going to set it down. And we're going to move the broccoli to the baking sheet to make a little more room on our cutting board, because next we're going to get the cauliflower chopped. Now I have preheated the oven already to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature we're going to be roasting at. So this would be a good time to go ahead and start that while we're chopping these vegetables, so it'll be ready to go when we're ready to put it in. I'm going to take a look at the quinoa, see if it's boiling yet. Okay, not quite there yet. I do have an electric stovetop, which tends to boil a little slower. If you've got a gas one, you may want to keep a closer eye on it, because I know those tend to heat up really fast. So this is half of a head of cauliflower. I used the other half earlier when I was doing a test run of this recipe. Now, cauliflower, if you buy it in its raw form, will come with all these leaves attached on the side. You can do things with those if you want. We're not going to be making use of those in today's recipe. When you look inside of the cauliflower, though, you'll see in this middle portion running up, this core here is really, really hard. It's pretty solid. So we're actually not going to use that. We're going to just focus on the little florets here at the top. That's what we want for this recipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to see where this part actually starts and just cut off the bulk of that bottom portion. Now, depending on how sharp your knife is, you may have a little bit of difficulty getting through there. It's usually not too bad. I'm going to move this piece over here. And then you should be able to pretty easily pull off those extra cauliflower leaves at this point. Some of them may be wrapped around the cauliflower tightly. It's not too big of a deal if they end up in the recipe, though. They are edible, like most other parts of the vegetable. So now we have, this is probably looking a little more like typical cauliflower would. We do still have this middle piece here that's pretty hard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a triangular cut, or an upside down V, and I'm just going to remove that rough part of the cauliflower. So you'll cut into a little bit, then go to the other side and repeat, of course, being very careful with that. And what that'll do is loosen that up. I need to cut a little bit deeper there so that you can pull out that core part. If you cut all the way through, that's okay. You can see I've pre-cut that little angle there. So now I can just follow that line I made and chop that out. So that's what the little triangle I was cutting looks like. So we've removed the core. If you've got some cauliflower attached to it, just go ahead and take your knife and separate that. And we'll move this over here to this discard pile. Now for the rest of these pieces of cauliflower, if you've cut the core well, they should actually break apart really easily into florets. If you didn't cut high enough with your core, you may need to run the knife through and break it up a little bit. But whatever works for you. Some people just like to pull it apart at this stage because it's usually pretty easy to do. So my goal here is to just visually try to make these about the size of the broccoli pieces. So I'm kind of eyeballing that. Again, we were doing about 1 inch. And we just want them to be consistent for cooking. So I'll go ahead and move this over to our pan. And let's take a look at the quinoa again, see if that started boiling. Not quite there yet. We're getting there. It's bubbling a little bit. Okay, so to get this ready to go in the oven, what we are going to do is we're going to make use of some cooking oil. I'm using olive oil today. You are welcome to use any heart-healthy cooking oil you like. It may be peanut oil. You may be using soybean oil, canola oil. Those are all going to be heart-healthy choices. I'm just using olive oil today. And we're going to take a tablespoon of it. Now, if you've got an oil drizzler, that's great. You can just lightly drizzle that on top of everything. If you don't, I recommend measuring out the amount of oil that you're going to use, 1 tablespoon in this case, and then using like a half teaspoon, just getting scoops of it and sort of drizzling it like that. The idea here is that this gives us a little more control over the amount of oil. If you're using an open bottle, like the big one I've got there, and you try to drizzle a small amount, chances are a lot more oil is going to come out. And oil is super dense, so that'll add a lot of calories. Even if it's a heart-healthy oil, if we're adding a bunch of calories, that can just throw our calorie balance a little bit out of balance. So we've got that on there. 1 tablespoon again. This is a teaspoon of oregano, which is going to give us a little bit of flavor. It's going to be really nice with the lemon that we're going to have in here later. So we're just spreading that around. And then we're going to do 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Okay, looks like that quinoa is boiling, so we're going to take care of that. Okay, so what I did was I turned the heat down significantly. We just want it to simmer, so you might be seeing some light bubbles at the top of the water. That means it's simmering. We don't want it to be a really vigorous bubble, though. That means it's still boiling. So you may have to play with that heat to get it to simmer. And once it's there, it'll take about 15 minutes to complete. So I'll just periodically pop over and keep an eye on that to see how the bubbles are doing. So we're going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of salt because we don't want to salt it too heavily. And just like before, we're going to just sprinkle that around. And that's going to give us some nice flavor. At this point, you can take a spoon or a spatula, anything like that you may have, and we're going to just stir this. So we're mixing it around so that that salt and oil is just coating all the pieces evenly. You want to be able to bite into each piece, and you want it to taste like really tender and juicy, and the salt really helps with that, as does the oil. So just mix it around, make sure everything's in contact with the pan. We do want it in one flat layer. This will help it cook evenly. So don't have things stacked on top of each other if you can avoid it. Okay. So what we're going to do, one more ingredient I forgot, I apologize. We're going to do garlic on here, which is just a great way to add flavor to anything. I'm using minced garlic, and we're going to use 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. If you prefer to use fresh garlic, you can. You're going to want to do 2 cloves of fresh garlic, and you're going to want it to be finely chopped. The minced garlic's nice because it's already chopped up, so I'm just throwing that on there, and then we'll give it another stir to just move that garlic around, make sure that the flavor is evenly distributed. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pop this in the oven. We're going to put it in there for 10 minutes, and we're going to prepare some other vegetables in the meantime. Now I'm just checking on the quinoa again, turning down that heat a little bit because it was bubbling a bit more than I wanted it to, and that's okay. You'll just have to kind of play it by ear there. So let's move on to the other vegetables. We've already got broccoli and cauliflower, which are incredibly healthy, but we're going to make it even better. We are going to add in a red bell pepper, and we're going to add in some zucchini. Now, the reason that we put those vegetables in first is they're a little bit denser, meaning that they take a little longer to cook. These have higher water content and they're thinner, so they cook a considerable bit faster. So what we want is to start cooking the heartier vegetables before adding in these. If you've ever worked with like potatoes before, you would start those in advance and then you might add in some of the softer things. So the 10 minutes that those are in there for will give us time to get these chopped and ready to then add in. So with bell peppers, my typical method is I cut off the top and the bottom, and I'll show you why here in just a second. So I take the knife, I'm going to cut off the top and cut off the bottom, and you should be able to see through it almost like a tube. This shows us all the points. There's usually 3 or 4 where the core of it, that middle part, is connected. And since it's easy to see now, we can take our knife and just poke it in those 3 spots. 3 easy little cuts, and that should allow you to pull that right out. If you cut all the way into the pepper, you might get pieces of that chopped up in there, and that's no fun. So then we've got our little pepper tube. I will cut it in half, and that gives me a nice flat piece to cut. Anytime you can make a vegetable flat or give it a flat edge, it just prevents things from rocking and makes them simpler. Now I'm going to go for 1-inch cuts again, just like I did with my broccoli and cauliflower. So I'm cutting this into strips, and then I'm just going to rotate it and then cut perpendicular, still aiming for roughly 1-inch pieces. And I'll repeat this with our other side here. So the bell pepper, the broccoli, the cauliflower, the zucchini, they're bringing in a lot of great nutrition. We're getting vitamin A, vitamin C. These are things that support our immune system, our cells, our skin. There's just so much great value there. So it's really nice to get those in a variety of different forms. Now, if you want to add an extra bell pepper, you can chop this top part here and put it in. But this is all the recipe calls for. So I'm actually going to set this to the side. I have another recipe I can use that for later this week. So we've got that chopped up. Now let's talk about the zucchini. This is half of a zucchini. I used the other half for something else this week. But what I like to do is I will cut the top off, and then I will cut it in half. And the reason for that is just like with the bell pepper, that gives me a nice flat surface so that when I've got this on the table, it's not rocking around. You can imagine if you were trying to cut through the bottom part that this could rock, and that can make the knife slip. So we want to try to avoid that. So what I will do here, once again, going for 1-inch cuts roughly, I'm actually going to cut lengthwise and cut it approximately in half. This will depend on the size of your zucchini, how many times you might cut it in that direction. And then I'm going to turn it and then just cut all the way down, again, going for roughly 1-inch pieces. Okay, so we've got zucchini and bell pepper now. So as I mentioned, the broccoli and cauliflower are roasting for 10 minutes. So we've got a couple more minutes on that before we'll pull it out. So let's talk about more of the nutritional value of these vegetables. I mentioned the vitamin A, I mentioned the vitamin C. Vegetables are also a great source of fiber, which if you've ever heard one of my cooking demonstrations before, I am always talking about fiber. It is so, so good for our body. And most people don't actually get enough fiber in their diet. So this recipe is excellent because a serving of this recipe will help you hit about 40 to 50% of your fiber target for the day because it's just packed with that much nutrition. So the benefits of fiber, one thing it does is it helps us feel full and satisfied. We can eat less food and kind of feel like we've eaten more because fiber slows down our digestion in our stomach in a positive way that allows us to process things, feel full, and then get all those nutrients ready to go. As it moves into our intestine, fiber is really beneficial for intestinal health because it helps things pass through smoothly. It's great for regularity in terms of bowel movement, something that a lot of us may shy away from talking about, but it's an important health thing to keep our colon healthy, and fiber is great at that. Additionally, fiber can help us with our blood sugar control by slowing down the rate at which our blood sugar increases after eating a meal. It spaces it out and makes it a little more even. And it can also lead to a healthier cholesterol level. If you've got elevated cholesterol, fiber can actually bind to some of that and help lower your blood cholesterol. So there's health benefits all over the place when it comes to fiber, which is why I'm always looking to add in vegetables to any meal or snack that I am doing. So the bell pepper, the zucchini, broccoli, cauliflower, even the quinoa are all going to be giving us a great source of fiber. So what we are going to do in our next couple steps here is in just a minute, I'm going to take that pan out because it's been almost 10 minutes now. And then we are going to add in these vegetables on top of it and put it back in for about 15 minutes. This will be the final roasting period. It'll give the broccoli and the cauliflower a little extra time to cook. It'll also allow the zucchini and the bell pepper to cook to roughly the same point since they are more water-based. So let me grab my oven mitt here and we will go ahead and pull that out. So at this point in the process, your broccoli should probably be turning a very bright green. If you've ever cooked it before, when you first start to cook it, it gets really, really bright green. It's a really lovely color to look at. So that's where we are. And it smells really good too. The oregano and the garlic coming off of this is a really pleasant scent. So I'm going to set it down here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to take our zucchini and our bell pepper and just toss them on the pan here. Nothing too complicated. Of course, be very mindful of our baking sheet. It is very hot. It has been in the oven at 425 degrees. So be very careful as you're moving pieces over. So just like before, we're going to mix it around here real quick. We want an even layer of things, and we want a little bit of the oil that's on the pan to come into contact with the zucchini and the bell pepper so that they can get the flavor and get some of that oil so they don't stick as well. So just mixing things around here, once again, spreading it to that single layer to allow for even cooking. Okay. So let's go ahead and put this back in the oven. Like I said, the second time around, we're going to do it for 15 minutes or until your vegetables start to become like lightly browned, crispy texture. And I've already made some, so I'm going to show you exactly what that'll look like. Okay. So what we are going to do towards the end here is we are going to prep a couple other things just to kind of be the icing on the cake on our bowls. And that's going to be using a lemon and an avocado. So the lemon is going to add just a really satisfying like zest and lemon flavor to this. We're going to squeeze some of the lemon juice on it. And if you've heard of some of the cooking principles before, there's a lot of focus on basically making use of things like fat, salt, heat, and an acid. And those four combinations just make things really tasty. We've added healthy fats through our olive oil. We've added a little bit of salt to give it some flavor. Of course, we have heat coming from our oven that is roasting these vegetables, and our acid will come from the lemon juice. Those four flavor combinations will really make this dish pop. Now, before I cut into either the lemon or the avocado, we do want to rinse them just like any other fruit or vegetable. Although we won't be eating the outside, when we use our knife to cut into it, if there's any dirt or grime or anything like that on the outside, we'll be pressing it into the edible portion. So it's always good to just give them a quick rinse. Okay. So for avocados, whenever you are selecting them, you want them to be firm, but give a little bit of a squish, just a little give. If it's super soft, it's probably mushy and bruised, or it's past ripe, and that's not going to be great. So you want it to have some structure, but just a little bit of give. It's kind of an art of figuring out if you have a ripe avocado or not. There are people who are way better at it than I am. Hopefully we've got a good one today. The general process, though, is the avocado has a big pit in the middle of it. It almost looks like a giant acorn. You cannot cut through it, and you should not try to cut through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to find this little stem at the top there, and that's going to be our guide. I'm going to take my knife, and I'm going to fairly gently press into it until I get resistance. So you're not trying to chop it, you're just trying to push into it gently. When you hit that resistance, it means you've hit that pit. So what we're going to do is I'm going to rotate the avocado very slowly and carefully, lining up with that pit until we do a full circle all the way around. Now, if your avocado is pretty ripe, at this point, hopefully, you should be able to just gently pull it apart and it should come undone. Like that. So this is kind of what we think of when we see like a cartoon image of an avocado, right? This is like our stock photo. And there's that little pit there that we cut into. So again, do not try to chop all the way through it. You're going to press until you get that there. To get this out, a lot of people will stick the knife in it and twist, and that pulls it right out, which is perfect. So at this point, we are going to slice these into smaller pieces. Everyone's got a different style of doing this, but what some people like to do is peel the avocado first and then chop things up. The avocado is, I don't want to call it slimy, but it's like oil. It's oily because it's a fat. So if you pull the skin off first, your hands are going to get a little oily. If you're not bothered by that, you can go for it. The other thing some people will do is they will cut the slices with the skin still on. They're not trying to cut through the skin. They're just trying to cut all the way to the skin through the avocado. And I'll show you what this looks like here in just a second. So you can see how I'm making those cuts like that. I'm going to go the opposite direction now, perpendicular to that. And some people like this method because after you've done this, you can take, let me grab a spoon and try to show you. You can take something like a spoon, and if you did it right, we'll see if I did it right, you should be able to slip under the skin and just pop those pieces out just like that. And then you've got a really nicely diced piece of avocado. If you don't cut too far, you can get a bigger spoon and knock these all out at once. I'm going to try to demonstrate it. This is a little bit of a smaller one. And that'll get some chunks going there. Not a perfect execution, but that's okay. I still think it's an easier process than going through and removing the whole skin and then doing this over and over again for each piece. So that's all I'm going to pull out for now because I'm just going to make one bowl on camera to show you what we're working with. Something to note about avocado pieces is they will brown as they're oxidized. So when they have contact with oxygen or the air, they will start to brown, which can make them look a little less appetizing. The good news is the lemon juice, if you squeeze a little bit on top of them, just like with apple slices, will help them retain their nice, beautiful color. So let's go ahead and chop the lemon here. I'm not doing anything too crazy. I am just going to quarter this because we're going to put a quarter of a lemon in each bowl. And the idea is right before you eat it, you'll squeeze some of that lemon on top to give everything some flavor. In terms of meal prep bowls, you can get fancy divided ones, or you can just do any simple Tupperware bowl. This isn't even a nice glass one. It's just a cheap plastic one, but it totally gets the job done. So let's check on our quinoa. It's been about 15 to 20 minutes, which means it should be good to go. One thing you can do to see if it's ready is check if the water's been absorbed. If there's still a lot of water in it, you probably need to cook it a little longer. If the water's gone and it's like fluffed up, you should be good to go. So we're gonna take a peek at that real quick. Okay. So I'll see if I can show you on the camera here. That's what it looks like once it's cooked. Like I mentioned, it's kind of similar to rice in texture. It's got a slightly more nutty flavor is how some people will describe it. I really enjoy it. If you've never had it before, it's pretty affordable and very healthy, so I encourage you to give it a shot. So what we're going to do is we are going to scoop out just about half a cup of this because we made 2 cups. So we want half a cup in each bowl for our even 4 servings. And you can just kind of tuck that in the corner if you want your bowl to look like that nice image that we showed at the beginning of today's presentation. So that's how we're starting, is just by building that in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add our roasted vegetables. So this is still going to be cooking a little bit longer. I don't want to make everyone wait for that. So I went ahead and pre-cooked some vegetables before we started today. Now I mentioned we were looking for things to be lightly browned. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this piece of cauliflower, hopefully you can see that nice kind of charred light brown texture there. Or similarly, this piece of broccoli has the same thing going for it. We still want it to be a little tender, but we want it to have started to get that nice crispy edge. That'll make it really flavorful, but we don't want to go overboard. Of course, if you like things well done, you can always push that further. So I'm just going to scoop some of this in here and add it to our bowl. And since we're making 4 bowls, you can eyeball that and do about a quarter of the vegetables you've cooked there and add them in. And I think the pops of color are really nice with the bell pepper, with the cauliflower and the broccoli and the quinoa. And then the hummus portion of this, you have some options. Today we're going to use store-bought hummus because we've got a couple things going on already and we do want to keep it simple. But if you're feeling adventurous and you like to make your own hummus, that is always an option. I'm going to grab the store-bought one real quick. And we're going to measure out a quarter cup of this and add it into our bowl there. So hummus is great. It's made from chickpeas. It's going to give us a little more fiber, as well as some protein, and just be a nice flavor to mix in with everything. So we will scoop that over here into the corner. And this is great for dipping the veggies in, mixing in with the quinoa, really however you want to handle that. Now I'm going to take some of my avocado pieces and top them on top of the quinoa, or you can really put them anywhere. But the avocado is going to add more healthy fat and make the meal more satisfying. And then our last thing will be to use our lemon wedge. Now, if you're packing the bowl, you can stick the lemon wedge in there and you will have a nice little bowl ready to go. You can refrigerate these for up to 4 days, so they're great for leftovers. If you want to, you can reheat it in a microwave wherever you are, assuming your meal prep container is microwave safe. Now, microwaving hummus, not everyone may be crazy about that, so you may want to wait to add the hummus in until afterwards or package it in a separate container. And then when you're ready to serve, take your lemon wedge and just squeeze some of that lemon juice on top of the vegetables over the quinoa, over the avocado. It's going to make everything really bright and flavorful, and it will prevent that avocado from browning. If you're worried about that, I would recommend before serving, like as you're packaging all of them, just squeeze a little bit of lemon juice on top of the avocado. It'll make it look nicer if you're worried about that. So that's really it. That is going to be our lemon roasted vegetable hummus veggie bowl. They are incredibly healthy. They're very low in calories. It's about 360 calories for one bowl. Super high in fiber, like I said, about 50% of your daily needs, and still packs 12 grams of protein. So this should keep you full and satisfied and is very healthy. If you're someone who needs a little more calories or you're worried about it not being filling enough, you could always add in a little bit of additional protein. Doing some grilled chicken or something like that to complement it could, I think, go really well with this vegetable and grain mix we've got here. But otherwise, that is our meal prep bowl, and you can make 4 of those on this one serving. We are going to be sending out a copy of the recipe along with the nutrition information. So if you thought this recipe looked interesting, you can follow along at home and try to make it yourself. I do see we've got a message in the chat here. I want to take a look at it real quick. Oh, this is just someone talking about the method of cutting bell peppers and that they're going to try that from now on. Absolutely. Someone showed that to me a couple of years ago, and it kind of changed how I was chopping bell peppers. It's always funny that people have different strategies for various vegetables, and some of them might just click with you in a way that's really nice. I find that you can get a lot of the pepper off without having to worry about things. And with those extra pieces we cut off at the top, you can always go back and just trim those pieces off. As I mentioned, I'm probably going to throw those in a salad that I'll have later today and make good use of it. So pretty easy recipe. There's a couple different steps that you have to have going simultaneously, but it's mostly just chopping vegetables and roasting them and then throwing it all in a bowl. So I encourage everyone to try this. I really enjoyed the flavors, and I hope that you will too. I don't see any additional questions or comments at this time. So just a reminder, you're going to get an email here in a day or two that'll have a link to the recipe, the recording, and a short survey. The survey gives us feedback and lets us know what you thought of today's presentation. If you've got ideas for improvement, future recipes, anything like that, we would absolutely love to hear it. And I really appreciate the feedback. Additionally, if you are interested in this event or other events like this and are not already on our mailing list, we do events like this all throughout the month. I mentioned we have virtual workouts, we've got cooking demonstrations, yoga and meditation, we have our snack and share support group, all sorts of excellent well-being activities. If you want to get on our mailing list, you can email us at edws@gsu.edu, and we'll be sure to put that in the chat here today as well so that people can copy that if they're interested. Speaking of events, we do have a meditation and yoga session that's going to be happening tomorrow at 12 p.m. It is virtual as well as in person on the Clarkston campus. So if you want to check that out, we definitely encourage you to look into that. We do have all of our events on the GSU web calendar as well as on our website. So thank you again, everyone, so much for attending. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon at one of our events. Thank you.